Hello, listeners! Welcome to Stars of the Golden Age, a show that highlights the lives of legends from film, music, and the birth of television during Hollywood's golden age and the few years surrounding it. I am your host, Erin Carlson. This episode is dedicated to my dear friend Amanda, who is tied with my mom as being my biggest fan. This one's for you, Amanda. Today, we will be discussing a remarkable actress whose work spanned over 50 years, Olivia de Havilland. A great deal of my research came from the mouth of Olivia de Havilland herself. I watched her remarkable 2006 interview with the Academy of Achievement when Olivia was 90 years old. Olivia de Havilland was born on July 1st, 1916 in Tokyo, Japan. Her little sister Joan was born just 15 months later. You may know her as Academy Award winner Joan Fontaine. Why were the de Havilland sisters born in Tokyo? Both of their parents had moved there separately from England. Their father, Walter, was an English professor in Tokyo before turning to law and becoming a patent attorney also in Tokyo. The girl's mother, Lillian, was a singing instructor and an up-and-coming stage actress when she met Walter, having been educated at the prestigious Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, or RADA, in London. Walter was quite a bit older than Lillian, and he pursued her unsuccessfully for 7 years. He gave up, and then he tried again a little while later. He told her that they should flip a coin to see if they should get married. Well, Lillian lost, and they got married. Pretty romantic story. Walter was, unfortunately, not a very faithful husband. All of that energy into pursuing her for so many years, and he immediately starts cheating on her. And he was cheating on her with one of their household maids. Lillian even found his gold watch in said maid's room. Well, Lillian was not going to put up with it. The couple decided that Lillian and the girls would relocate to Vancouver Island in British Columbia, on the far west coast of Canada, of course. She wanted to be far, far away from Japan. Vancouver offered a nice location where Walter could fairly easily visit the girls. The ship passage to Vancouver via the northern route would only take 1 week. But if they were in San Francisco, which was the other option, the passage would include an alternate route and take 2 weeks. In February of 1919, when Olivia was just 2 years old, the family set sail to the new home of Lillian and the girls. But they would make a quick stop in San Francisco to visit a well-renowned pediatrician to look over the girls since they both sadly suffered from respiratory issues. During the passage, Olivia had become very ill, and the pediatrician in San Francisco took one look in her mouth and announced they weren't going anywhere until her tonsils came out. Lillian didn't really care if Walter's passage to visit the girls would take twice as long. They were staying in San Francisco. Lillian and the girls lived in a San Francisco apartment for about 6 months before they took a little vacation to a San Jose resort. One day during their trip, Lillian took her girls out to lunch in a nearby village called Saratoga, in what is now known as the Silicon Valley. And she fell in love with the beautiful scenery surrounded by apricot, prune, and pear orchards, rolling hills, and beautiful flowers and wildlife. I think the valley of Olivia's childhood is quite different from the valley of today. Lillian decided she would like to move to this beautiful little town, so she and the girls did. Olivia recounted her childhood memories in Saratoga with such love and appreciation. She absolutely loved growing up there. Lillian, now completely alone in the difficult pursuit of adequately preparing 2 daughters for the world ahead of them, was a very strict mother. Academic achievement was a priority, and the girls were forced to recite Shakespeare every single night. If they messed up, they'd receive a sharp slap of the ruler on their knuckles. Lillian and Walter officially divorced 6 years later in 1925 when Olivia was 8 years old and her sister Joan was 7. Olivia said in her 2006 Academy of Achievement interview that on one of her father's visits to her as an adult many years later in the 1950s, he asked her if she knew why her mother had abruptly wanted to leave Japan and the marriage. Olivia described the whole situation about the maid and finding his gold watch in said maid's room in their home, and he was shocked. According to him, it was all a huge misunderstanding. You see, he had a good friend who worked in intelligence who had asked him to house a young Japanese woman who was in great danger and to watch over her. So that's all that was. That old excuse. Olivia 100% believed her father. She said he was a virgin until he was 36 years old, not sure why she knows that, and that his first time was arranged. She described it in a very eloquent way, but what she was trying to say was that he lost his virginity to a sex worker, and that he was a very prudish man. So there was no way he would have a spicy extramarital affair. Although I did read that he later married that young Japanese maid, so there is that. Affair or not, I guess we'll never know, but the situation is what led Olivia de Havilland and her sister Joan Fontaine closer to the glimmery lights of Hollywood and closer to being on our movie screens. 2 months after her official divorce from Walter, Lillian remarried a man named George Fontaine, and thus would be the name Olivia's sister Joan would later use in her film career. George was even stricter than Lillian, much stricter, and Olivia was not a fan. While Joan tried to please their new stepfather, Olivia refused to go anywhere above simple courtesy and politeness. The girls nicknamed him the Iron Duke. And the Iron Duke was both emotionally and physically abusive. The girls had a choice of punishment for simple offenses: a tablespoon of cod liver oil, which would make them vomit, or a couple of hard whacks on the shins with a wooden hanger. The more severe the offense in the Iron Duke's mind, the more severe the beating. Sisters Olivia and Joan had been very close up until this pivotal point in their childhoods. This new divide, stemming from their new family dynamic, would be the turning point that would lead them into their famous, lifelong rivalry. It became the point of no return in their relationship as sisters. Joan later spoke often about how cruel Olivia was to her. According to Joan, Olivia never wanted to have a sibling and spent her life resenting Joan's existence. Joan was always a physically unwell child. She suffered from many ailments and missed a lot of school. She always felt that Olivia thought she was better than her because of this. Olivia was the healthy sister, the academically successful sister, the outgoing sister. According to Joan, Olivia wrote a will when she was 9 years old that read, quote, "I bequeath all my beauty to my younger sister Joan, since she has none," end quote. I'm sorry, but that's kind of cute. I need to stress that these are Joan's accounts from her memoirs. In everything I read of Olivia and the interviews I watched of her, she didn't say one negative thing about her sister. In fact, she didn't really say anything. It appears that she made a point in her life to simply not discuss her relationship, or lack thereof, with her sister Joan Fontaine in interviews. And that is just fine. So please take the few details I include from Joan's memoirs with a grain of salt. Olivia loved school, and she was very devoted to her studies all throughout her childhood and adolescence. She recalled her favorite teacher being her 5th and 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Reed, because she supported incorporating the arts into her everyday teaching. She encouraged creative thinking and imagination, something that of course is commonplace now, at least in my classroom it is, but not so much in the early 20th century. Olivia was first introduced to the performing arts in high school, and she discovered that she really enjoyed acting. It was kind of in her blood. Her mother encouraged her to take classes in public speaking and to join the drama club in order to support her interests. One of Olivia's stepfather's controlling rules over his girls, though, was that they were to come home immediately after school and they were forbidden from being involved in any after-school activities. Well, Olivia secretly tried out for a play during her junior year in high school, and she was delighted when she found out that she was cast in a role. Practice and rehearsals would be held after school. When her stepfather found out, he told her she had a choice to make: drop out of the play or move out of his house. Olivia was in the play. She never slept another night in the Iron Duke's house again, her family home. Various friends of Olivia's mother, Lillian, took her in for a while, and then they graciously pooled money together to afford her rent in the guest room of a local woman's home. This is all very upsetting circumstances for a teenage girl, and Olivia's grades really suffered as a result of the trauma and change in her life. Her teachers knew that she was a great student and had always received excellent grades, so they took the time to turn her around and get her back on track. She spent her senior year back on straight A's. She was the editor of the yearbook. She earned an academic scholarship, and she finished out high school by graduating second in her class. Aside from her high school stage work, Olivia had begun doing work with the Saratoga Community Players, a local theater group. In 1933, shortly after that first high school play that got her kicked out of the Iron Duke's house, Olivia starred as Alice in Alice in Wonderland for the Community Players, and she loved the experience. While Olivia's aspirations were on a positive trajectory, her relationship with her sister had gone from bad to worse during those teenage years. According to Joan's memoirs, their fights would get downright nasty before Olivia was kicked out of the house. Again, this is according to Joan, who is definitely more open and possibly a little creative in her retelling of the past. The only thing I could really find that Olivia had said about the relationship was that she simply just came to a point where she decided she needed to rid herself of toxic relationships in her life in order to live a peaceful existence. And her one-time loving relationship with her sister had become just that. It's as simple as that, according to Olivia. Joan also had some traumatic drama going on with their stepfather during this time. She accused him of making sexual advances towards her. This, along with her now toxic relationship with her sister, left her packing her bags and moving to Tokyo to finish up her high school years under the care of her father. Lillian had lost both of her daughters because of her abusive, controlling husband. When Olivia graduated from high school in 1934, she had put her all into her acting aspirations that summer following her senior year. She still planned to go to college that fall, and she had earned that scholarship to do so, but she was going to act her little heart out all summer. And then it would be off to Mill College to study English and become an English teacher. She had her life all planned out. Olivia continued working with the Saratoga Community Players in local stage productions, and then she hit pay dirt when she landed an understudy part in a Max Reinhardt play. He had traveled to Hollywood from his native Austria, where he was a hugely successful producer, to do a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream at the iconic outdoor 25,000-seat Hollywood Bowl. Olivia had played a role in their local production, and she wanted in on Reinhardt's production. It would be a huge opportunity. She knew that he was behind the success of many stars, and it would be a great honor to work under him. Luck struck even harder when the actress that she was understudying dropped the role to do a movie, and Olivia now had the part of Hermia. A 14-year-old Mickey Rooney was also in the production, as well as the subsequent film adaptation. The play's run was a big success, so successful that it would go on tour for 4 weeks following its run at the Hollywood Bowl. Then, after the tour, it was time to go to college. But she was so beloved that she was offered the role of Hermia in the film adaptation of the show. She had a really difficult decision to make now. College and a life as an English teacher, or take a huge chance and try her luck on the silver screen. I think we all know what she decided. She was going to be a movie star. And a couple of months down the road, she would sign a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers. Her life's path had been rerouted. Well, as the old studios were known so well for doing, they had to transform the girl they just picked up into the perfect woman. What a bunch of middle-aged men considered the perfect woman, that is. They deemed her overweight, so she was immediately put on a diet. I don't know exactly her starting weight, but I'm guessing it was nothing over 115. She was soon down to an alarming 98 pounds, and she was 5'3". She would later call this, which she was later able to identify for what it was, anorexia, Hollywooditis. This amongst many other things, being forced to lose weight, having no real friends, being owned by the studio, being worked to death, and the list goes on. In 1934, 18-year-old Olivia first met the dashing 25-year-old Tasmanian actor Errol Flynn, as they were set up for a screen test together to gauge their chemistry. Spoiler alert, they had it. Olivia recalled in her 2006 interview of her first meeting with him that he asked her, "What do you want out of life?" And she loved that he asked her this question. She thought it was very deep and an extraordinary thing to ask someone. Her answer to him was this, quote, "I would like respect for difficult work well done," end quote. I absolutely love that quote, and I can relate to her so much with my own career, as I'm sure many of us can. So she, of course, asked him in return, "What do you want out of life?" And his answer was quite different from hers. He said, "I want success." She knew what he meant by that was fame and money, and she thought to herself, that's not enough. Then she continued in her interview to say, quote, "And it did prove indeed in Errol's life not to be enough," end quote. Olivia and Errol were cast in the 1935 film Captain Blood, and they would star in 7 more films together in their careers. They had amazing on-screen chemistry together. Now that Olivia had a steady Hollywood paycheck, she repaid those friends of her mother's who had graciously paid for a safe place for her to stay when her stepfather had kicked her out. She never forgot the kindness that they showed her during that difficult point in her life. Olivia was slowly gaining popularity in movies throughout the next few years. However, she was continually cast as the good girl, and she didn't like being continually cast as the good girl. She wanted to diversify her work, but that's often how actors and actresses were used in those days. They found their part and pressed repeat. Olivia's sister Joan had seen the rising success of her sister in the movie industry, and she wanted some of that too. She appeared in some off-Broadway plays and then made her way back to California and into Hollywood. It sounds like their mother, Lillian, also moved to LA during this time of Olivia's early movie career as well. Olivia and Joan's sibling rivalry was as hot as ever, and Joan wanted to climb to the top and crush Olivia's success. But in November of 1938, Olivia received a call that would forever change her life. On the other end of that call was director George Cukor, the original director of Gone with the Wind. They were beginning the casting of the movie, and he wanted to offer the role of Melanie Hamilton to Olivia. Was she interested? Boy, was she ever. Then he asked her, "Would you consent to doing something highly illegal?" Well, Olivia de Havilland was a pretty prim and proper lady, so this question took her aback a bit. He explained to her that since she was under contract with Warner Brothers, they had no right to try and steal her away from them for their movie. But he really wanted to see how she did reading for the part of Melanie. So he asked her to very secretly come to Selznick Studios, to a private entrance, and to secretly be taken in to read for the part. After his explanation of the plan, she answered, quote, "Yes, I'd be delighted to do this highly illegal thing," end quote. So cute. Well, Jack Warner didn't think there was anything cute about it. When David O. Selznick approached him about lending out Olivia de Havilland for the role of Melanie in Gone with the Wind, he said, absolutely not. Then Olivia herself pleaded with him. Nope, not happening. So what did Olivia do? She went to Jack Warner's wife. She knew if there was any way to convince him, it was through his wife. And it worked. A talent exchange took place then. Jimmy Stewart for Olivia de Havilland. She was now free to work on Selznick's upcoming film adaptation of Margaret Mitchell's novel, Gone with the Wind. And this would be a pivotal point in her life and her career. I really love what she said about portraying the role of Melanie. She said, quote, "Melanie had these feminine qualities that I felt were very endangered at that time, and they are from generation to generation. And I thought that should somehow be kept alive. And one way I could contribute to them being kept alive was to play Melanie," end quote. And in my opinion, she succeeded. Olivia was in the big time now. She adored working with Vivien Leigh and Clark Gable. She said the three of them would often play Battleship in between scenes while the crew was setting up lighting. A few weeks into shooting, George Cukor disappeared off the set, and the cast and crew were told that he was no longer directing the picture. He was being replaced by Victor Fleming under a cloud of mystery. Everyone on set was absolutely devastated because they had all loved working with Cukor and adored him as the director of the film. And according to Olivia, the whole direction of the movie changed with his exit. She said that the movie seemed to be going in more of the direction of a female-dominated story under Cukor's direction, which of course it still ended up very much being with the story of Scarlett, but she said individual scenes were reshot to put more emphasis on Clark Gable instead of the original shots that had deep emotional interactions between Scarlett and Melanie. Victor Fleming, however, also wouldn't see the film through its entirety. About 4 weeks into filming, he experienced a mental health episode that caused him to step away from the movie. Sam Wood then took the place of director, and Victor Fleming was luckily able to rejoin the crew once he was well enough to do so. Although initially worried about the change in direction, Olivia and the rest of the cast and crew quickly realized that they were in good hands being directed under Victor Fleming. Now, a humongous deal was made about the planning, casting, and filming of Gone with the Wind, and all of Hollywood was getting a little tired of all the fuss and just assumed because of all of that fuss, it was of course going to be a huge box office flop. Olivia de Havilland knew otherwise, though. She said of this, quote, I knew. We were making a film that was going to have quite a different history from any other film that had ever been made, and it would endure. And by haven't, it has, hasn't it? End quote. Yes, it has, Miss de Havilland. Yes, it has. That year's Academy Awards ceremony was a very important one, with a lot of really great movies made that year. Vivien Leigh took home the Best Actress Oscar, and the film won a total of 8 Academy Awards that night, including Best Picture. Olivia de Havilland was up against her co-star, Hattie McDaniel, who played the unforgettable Mammy, for Best Supporting Actress. Hattie McDaniel, of course, made history that night when she became the first African American to win an Academy Award. Olivia de Havilland was very upset at not winning, but she soon came to terms with it and was extremely happy for McDaniel, and was honored to have been able to be there to see her make history. Olivia's escort to the New York premiere of Gone with the Wind had been fellow actor Jimmy Stewart. The two really hit it off that night and ended up dating exclusively. He actually proposed to her the following year, in 1940, but she declined. She didn't want the responsibility of balancing a film career and a marriage and most likely children. She was 23 years old and simply wasn't ready for that kind of commitment yet. 2 years after her success and Oscar nomination with Gone with the Wind, Olivia was honored with another nomination. This time for her role in the 1941 movie Hold Back the Dawn, and this time it wasn't for Best Supporting Actress, it was for Best Actress. There was one little thing adding a little extra spiciness and drama to the 1941 Academy Awards and Olivia's pursuit of that highly coveted statue. One of the other actresses nominated for Best Actress was Joan Fontaine for her role in Suspicion. She was up against her own sister for the Best Actress Academy Award. This is the ultimate situation for a fiery sibling rivalry like the one between Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine. Olivia received Oscar heartbreak once again when it was her sister's name that was called to the podium to receive the Best Actress Academy Award that night. Later in the evening, she tried to offer Joan a congratulatory handshake, and Joan snubbed her. In Joan's recount of the night, she said all of the deep emotions of their dislike for each other as children, the fights, the negativity, it all came flooding back in that one moment, and she just froze. It really is so sad that they weren't more compatible as sisters and friends. Another momentous event occurred in 1941 when 25-year-old Olivia de Havilland officially became a citizen of the United States of America. Her situation was really unique, actually. Although she'd never lived a day of her life in England, she was officially a British citizen, born in Japan. When she became a U.S. citizen, she did so just a few short weeks before Japan, her country of birth, attacked the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. Olivia's contract with Warner Brothers was up in May of 1943, but she had 6 months of suspension time tacked on for declining some films under her contract. That was a fairly common practice in those studio days. If you didn't like a role that was offered to you, you could decline it, and that working time would then be added on to the time of your contract. It wasn't that Olivia was being difficult necessarily, it's just that she felt very typecast and really wanted to challenge herself in more diverse and difficult roles. So in this case, Warner Brothers decided that she was to finish up her contract by being loaned out to other studios. Well, she didn't like the roles that they were pushing her into with other studios either, so she put up a fight. With the help of a lawyer, she learned that there was a California law prohibiting any employer from forcing an employee to be under contract for longer than 7 calendar years. And no actor had fought this ever before. Nobody until Olivia de Havilland. And she was prepared to go all the way to the California Supreme Court if she had to. She wasn't going to let anyone push her around. And she won. This case was monumental, and it marked the beginning of the end of the Hollywood studio system as it was. And the court's decision still to this day bears her name, the de Havilland Law. Back to Olivia's love life. Olivia dated here and there after her relationship with Jimmy Stewart, including brief romances with Howard Hughes and John Huston. Olivia began dating novelist Marcus Goodrich right before the U.S. entry into World War II, and their relationship was forced into hiatus with his service to his country, as many were. They were happy to be together again upon his return from the war, and the two were married in January of 1946. When Joan heard of this union, this was her comment, quote, "All I know about him is that he's had 4 wives and has written 1 book. Too bad it isn't the other way around," end quote. Oh, Joan. After her landmark court fight against Warner Brothers, Olivia became a free agent in Hollywood, which meant she could take whatever roles she was offered. Her chance to get her hands on one of those highly coveted Oscar statues came again in 1946 with the movie To Each His Own with Paramount. And this time, the statue was hers. She finally had her Oscar when she was voted the best actress in the entire industry that year. So, as rivalries are so good at doing, this event sprinkled a little more drama over the relationship between the two sisters. As Olivia had done for her sister 5 years prior, Joan approached Olivia the night of her Oscar win to offer her congratulations. And this time, Olivia snubbed Joan. Both sisters had remarked that they do not watch each other's movies because there are too many family traits between the two that they would become too self-conscious of their own acting styles. Joan did say about her sister, though, quote, "We may not get along personally, but I am absolutely thrilled that my sister has accomplished what she has. Imagine what we could have done if we had gotten together. We could have selected the right scripts, the right directors, the right producers. We could have built our own empire," end quote. Yes, they could have. Being able to be much more diverse in her roles, Olivia was really able to showcase her talents now, and she was on fire. She studied method acting, which, for those of you not familiar with that, it is the practice of working from the inside while playing roles, really embodying the character's true emotions and personality traits, and often staying in character off camera throughout the production. Olivia had her first chance to try out her method acting skills in the 1946 movie To Each Their Own. She had put her all into making this role perfectly executed, including meeting with a psychiatrist to learn how to fully understand how to feel in an extremely mentally ill mind, which is the role that she played in this film. She was able to diversify her talents similarly 2 years later in the 1948 film The Snake Pit. On the topic of mental illness, during World War II, Olivia spent quite a bit of time volunteering in hospitals, and she seemed to especially do well in the psychiatric units. The patients just really responded well to her. Between her time in the war hospitals and her time in the field preparing for her roles in To Each Their Own and The Snake Pit, Olivia had become fascinated with the study of mental health and treatment options for individuals with mental illness. She began devoting much of her personal time to volunteering in psychiatric hospitals, especially in helping men who had returned from combat with mental health struggles, what we today know as PTSD. In 1949, 3 years into their marriage, Olivia and Marcus welcomed a little baby boy named Benjamin into their family. Unfortunately, the marriage had already started to crumble. When Benjamin was 3 years old, Olivia and Marcus divorced. Olivia was 36 years old at this point. Rewinding a little bit before her divorce, just a year after having little Benjamin, Olivia took home her second Academy Award for Best Actress for her work in the movie The Heiress. This performance also earned her a Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Motion Picture Drama and a New York Film Critics Circle Award for Best Actress. During her son Benjamin's early childhood, Olivia drastically cut back her work so she could devote all of her time and energy to her child, which is very admirable considering the strides she had gone through to get to the point she was at in her career. She even excused herself from consideration for the role of Blanche Dubois in the 1951 film A Streetcar Named Desire, which of course went to her Gone with the Wind co-star Vivien Leigh. A year after her divorce from Marcus Goodrich, Olivia moved herself and her 4-year-old son to Paris. She had been granted full custody of Benjamin, and she wanted to ensure that her husband wouldn't try to eventually get partial custody, so she decided moving to a different country was the best way to achieve that. She was also saddened by the changes in Hollywood. She missed the glamour and properness that had disappeared. So off she and Benjamin went to Paris, France in 1953. She later said, quote, "I loved being around real buildings, real castles, real churches, not ones made of canvas. They were real cobblestones. Somehow the cobblestones amazed me. When I would meet a prince or a duke, he was a real prince, a real duke," end quote. Olivia met her second husband at the Cannes Film Festival shortly after relocating to Paris. She married Pierre Galante in 1955. Newlywed Olivia returned to Hollywood to make 2 movies, and then the following year, Olivia had a daughter named Giselle. This marriage did not stand the test of time either, and Olivia and Pierre separated in 1962 after 7 years of marriage. From many accounts I read, it doesn't appear that they got divorced until 1979. The two remained close until his death in 1998, and he even moved in with Olivia and she cared for him at the end of his life. The late 1950s brought Olivia de Havilland back to Hollywood for a few more film roles, but unfortunately none of them were real stunners. She was in her 40s by this time, and there just didn't seem to be remarkable roles for her now that she was stepping out of her youth. That aging gets us every time. Christmas of 1962 would be the only holiday that Olivia de Havilland and her sister Joan Fontaine would ever spend together in their adult lives. It seems like the two were able to be cordial to each other and exist together as much as possible, but that's about it. It is progress, though, but it didn't go any further. In fact, it would just become more sour than ever. Olivia and Joan's mother, Lillian, was diagnosed with cancer in her late 80s. Her two daughters disagreed strongly about her care. Olivia wanted their mother to receive treatment and surgery so she could potentially have a chance of living a longer life. Joan thought that she was too old to sustain harsh treatments and surgeries. While Joan was away on a tour, Lillian passed away. Olivia did not inform Joan of her passing, and she reportedly disposed of all of her belongings. According to Joan, Olivia also did not invite her to the memorial service, but she attended anyways. She said when Olivia was presented with the urn containing their mother's ashes, she sprinkled a small amount on her gravesite and handed the urn with the remaining ashes over to Joan, without one word being spoken between the two women. Joan said of this experience, quote, "I think it is so ironic that the death of this marvelous woman was responsible for our final schism," end quote. Olivia de Havilland starred in a few more movies in the 1970s, 1977's Airport being the most successful of them. She felt kind of forced to branch out over into the world of television in the 70s and 80s. Not because she wanted to necessarily, but because she knew she could find regular work on TV and she wanted to work. But here's what she had to say about television, just so you can get an idea of how she felt about this transition. Quote, "The TV business is soul-crushing, talent-destroying, and human being-destroying. These men in their black towers don't know what they're doing. It's slave labor. There is no elegance left in anybody. They have no taste. The only people who fight for what the public deserves are artists," end quote. Despite her deep opinions on television, she continued to work in TV all the way up until 1988. Mostly in made-for-TV movies, which were hot in the 80s. Her final acting job was in the made-for-TV movie, The Woman He Loved. This performance won her a Primetime Emmy nomination. A great way to gracefully bow out of a marvelous career that spanned more than 50 years. Her reason for leaving the screen wasn't a joyous one. Her firstborn child, Benjamin, had been diagnosed with Hodgkin lymphoma at the devastatingly young age of 19. Now at 39 years old, his condition was declining. Olivia cared for him in her Paris home in his final years, and he passed away with her by his side in 1991 at the age of 41. His father, Marcus, Olivia's first husband, passed away just a few months after the death of their son. And just 2 years earlier, Olivia had lost one of her very best friends, Betty Davis. This was an incredibly difficult time for Olivia, and she understandably slipped into a very private life as she mourned the loss of her child, her dear friend, and her ex-husband. She would stay out of the spotlight for well over a decade, living a peaceful, quiet life in Paris. Olivia returned to Hollywood in 2003 as a presenter at that year's Academy Awards ceremony, where she received a 60-second standing ovation when she entered the stage. That's amazing. She returned again in 2006 to attend a 90th birthday celebration thrown in her honor by the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences. And it was then that she gave the wonderful, almost 3-hour interview recounting her life and experiences for the Academy of Achievement. She was back in LA again at the age of 92 in 2008 as a presenter at a tribute to the life of her longtime friend, Betty Davis. She returned to Hollywood from her home in Paris twice more that same year, once to attend the funeral of another longtime friend, Charlton Heston, and the other to receive the prestigious United States National Medal of Arts from President George W. Bush. In 2010, French President Nicolas Sarkozy made her a Knight of the Légion d'honneur, the highest honor awarded by the French government. Olivia's only sibling, Joan Fontaine, died on December 15, 2013, at 96 years old. Olivia turned 100 years old on July 1, 2016. But she wasn't just sitting back in a lazy boy recliner watching daytime TV. She was active standing up for herself in the court system again. At 101 years old, Olivia defended her character in a suit against FX Networks and Ryan Murphy Productions for their false and negative portrayal in the drama Feud, Betty and Joan. It portrayed Olivia using foul language, and let me tell you, in the interviews I've seen with her, she is the most eloquently spoken woman you can imagine. And it also portrayed her as a nasty gossip regarding her rivalry with her sister. FX moved to have the case dismissed before it went to trial, but the California Supreme Court actually ruled that the case would indeed proceed. They appealed, and it was ultimately dropped. The court stated that, quote, "A person portrayed in one of these expressive works has no legal right to control, dictate, approve, disapprove, or veto the creator's portrayal of actual people," end quote. Which is our sad truth, now more than ever, and extremely frightening. After the case, Olivia said that although she didn't want her own name and reputation to be run through the mud and to be portrayed inaccurately, she mostly wanted to do what she could to protect other artists in the future. That's pretty admirable and awesome at the age of 101 years old. Determined as ever, a century into life. Also, just a couple weeks before her 101st birthday in 2017, she was appointed Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II. Olivia de Havilland, the remarkable actress and even more remarkable woman, died on July 26, 2020, in her Paris home. She was 104 years old. She was considered the last major star of the remarkable era of Hollywood's golden age. And what a legacy she left behind. I would like to share a few other interesting things I learned about the great Olivia de Havilland during my research. Bullet point number 1. She was one of only 3 other Oscar winners to have lived past 100 years old. The others were Louise Reiner and George Burns. Bullet point number 2. Although never romantically involved, she had a huge crush on her 8-time co-star Errol Flynn. I think a lot of people had a crush on Errol Flynn. He also said he had similar feelings for her but was married. Bullet point number 3. In 1965, Olivia de Havilland became the first female president of the jury at the Cannes Film Festival. Bullet point number 4. Olivia turned down the role of Mary in It's a Wonderful Life because she didn't want to work with her ex-boyfriend Jimmy Stewart. Ginger Rogers and Jean Arthur also turned down this role. Bullet point number 5. Olivia's cousin, Sir Geoffrey de Havilland, was a famed airplane engineer. His aircraft company produced the Mosquito, which has been considered to be the most versatile warplane ever built. He also built the world's first commercial jet airliner, which he did take his cousin Olivia for a spin in, of course. Bullet point number 6. Olivia attributed her longevity in life to the 3 L's: love, laughter, and learning. In conclusion, Olivia de Havilland may be known for three main things: her role as Melanie in Gone with the Wind, her on-screen chemistry with Errol Flynn, and her well-known rivalry with her also-famous sister, Joan Fontaine. But as you've just learned, there is so much more to Dame Olivia de Havilland than those three things. I enjoyed watching her Academy of Achievement interview so much. Watching her speak was a hard reminder of the class and eloquence that once was. The class and eloquence we will never see again. She lived her life with so much dignity and so much grace. Olivia de Havilland stood up for herself in a time when women didn't stand up for themselves. Women knew they couldn't win, but Olivia did it, and Olivia won. She fought for advancement in her career. She knew that she had talent that could be shown in much greater ways. She knew she couldn't be owned by anyone. She brought forth a suit against a powerful Hollywood studio that would change the course of history. She helped countless other actors. She even fought for herself and other public figures at the age of 100 years old. She was tough and fearless. Olivia de Havilland knew what she wanted out of her Hollywood career, and when Hollywood became something she didn't recognize or appreciate anymore, she left. She went somewhere that would bring her happiness. Her happiest years, half of her life, were spent in Paris, where she felt everyday peace. She recognized unhappiness, understood that our time on Earth is very short, and she did something about it. She sought out the happiness that we all deserve. Thank you, Olivia de Havilland, for showing us that we can stand up for what we want. Thank you for showing us that we all need to reach for happiness. Life is too short to settle for anything less. And thank you for showing us true grace. And thank you all for listening. Please follow the show where you listen to your podcasts, and please give the show a 5-star review if you like what you hear. And I would really appreciate a positive review on Apple Podcasts for those who listen there. You can find the show on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, so please follow on those socials and share as well. You guys already listening are the best. My main source for this episode was Olivia de Havilland's own words in her 2006 interview titled Olivia de Havilland, Legendary Leading Lady by the Academy of Achievement. She was just about to turn 90 years old in this interview, and it is absolutely amazing to hear her recollections so sharp, and it is so endearing to hear her stories. I also used a book titled Academy Award-Winning Sisters, The Lives of Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine by Charles Rivers Editors. A Vanity Fair article from the May 2016 issue titled Olivia de Havilland and the Most Notorious Sibling Rivalry in Hollywood History by William Stadium. Britannica.com, and you know it, IMDB.